Hello everyone, Jack Kennedy, economist with the Indeed Hiring Lab here with a UK labour market update at the start of 2022. In this video, I'll cover a few topics. I'll start by looking at where we are in the labour market recovery, then turn to shifts in the types of jobs candidates are interested in. I'll look at the evidence around the so-called Great Resignation and what's driving high job switching rates. And finally, what are the main labour market trends to watch out for in 2022? Looking at the broad picture, the UK labour market staged an impressive comeback from the pandemic last year. Not only has unemployment stayed low, largely thanks to the furlough scheme, but demand for new workers has roared back to break new records in recent months. Rather than the previously feared spike in unemployment, instead, we have the tightest labour market in decades, and the most pressing issue for many employers is worker shortages. Nonetheless, the labour market's recovery is incomplete. Employment has been recovering, but it's still more than 500,000 below its pre-pandemic level, largely reflecting a big decline in self-employment. Furthermore, the number of inactive people, neither working nor actively seeking employment, is also over 500,000 higher than on the eve of the crisis. In addition to this, Brexit curtailed the UK's ability to easily fill gaps with workers from EU countries. What all this means is that the number of UK workers participating in the labour force needs to increase substantially to plug those shortages. Hopefully, labour market momentum will continue in 2022, providing yet more opportunities and pulling more people into the workforce from the sidelines. However, the pandemic continues to cast a shadow of uncertainty, with new variants or waves of the virus presenting downside risks. Turning now to Jobseeker Interest trends. To find out which jobs workers are looking at, the Indeed Hiring Labs developed a metric we call relative Jobseeker Interest. This measures changes in interest in an occupational category since the beginning of the pandemic, compared with the average job. A positive change means that the occupations become relatively more attractive to job seekers. In general, the biggest falls in relative job seeker interest have been in lower paid sectors like cleaning, construction, warehousing and hospitality, where the supply of workers hasn't kept pace with resurgent demand. More broadly, Hiring Lab surveys find that job search lacks urgency. Even those currently out of work often seem in little hurry to find new jobs due to factors including financial cushions, caring responsibilities, and health concerns related to COVID-19. Meanwhile, interest has shifted toward higher paid occupations like legal, tech, and healthcare. That's partly due to the fact that job posting growth in these sectors hasn't been as spectacular as in many lower paid categories. Outside of frontline healthcare, many of these are occupations where working during the pandemic has been relatively safe and comfortable, and in which remote work is more feasible. Raising wages and offering hiring incentives may be one way for employers in lower paid sectors to bring in staff, but it may not be enough on its own. It may also be necessary to improve working conditions and offer greater job flexibility to draw more people back into the labour market, including older workers, disabled people and parents. Moving on now to job switching, there's been much talk about what's been dubbed a Great Resignation. In the UK, as well as in other countries, people are said to have reassessed their priorities during the pandemic, with many leaving their occupations to find something different. But do the data really support this? Both resignations and job-to-job moves jumped by a third in the third quarter of 2021, reaching record highs. Nearly 1 million people moved between jobs, with 38% of these switches being resignations, as we see in this chart. But that's not a high level historically. Rather than a mass reassessment of priorities, what appears to be happening is that voluntary job moves are ratcheting up as labour demand bounces back, giving people more options. Meanwhile, job switches that were postponed during the pandemic have finally had chances to take place. Most of the third quarter jump in job-to-job moves was driven by low-skilled and medium-skilled workers. High vacancies, as well as rising pay in some sectors, has given them greater opportunity and incentive to move, perhaps for better wages or working conditions. Over the past several months, the Indeed Hiring Lab surveyed 5,000 workers, both employed and unemployed, to learn more about job search behaviour. Our October survey showed that a range of factors were motivating people to look for new positions. Higher pay was cited by 44% of respondents, the most frequently reported reason. Changes of career path, better benefits, and more flexibility were also popular factors. Finally, what are the main labour market trends to watch in 2022? Though the latest wave of the virus is a near-term headwind, particularly for sectors like hospitality, wider labour market conditions seem set to remain tight, spelling continued hiring challenges for employers. A key question is whether this tight labour market will translate into a broadening of pay growth across the labour market. So far, strong pay growth has been confined to a few sectors experiencing the biggest shortages, though that could change. Rising inflation gives workers whose skills are in demand every incentive to push for pay increases. But if pay growth threatens to run too hot, the Bank of England could hike interest rates, which could ultimately slow job growth. So wage increases need to hit the sweet spot of protecting living standards without prompting policymakers to boost interest rates too swiftly. Another question is how much further labour demand can strengthen without an accompanying pickup in labour supply. So far, hiring's hit record levels, but persistent worker shortages could eventually impair the ability of businesses to expand further. This could act as a drag on growth and feed back ultimately into slower hiring. That's all for now. As always, you can keep up with our research on hiringlab.org. That's a free resource that's available for anyone who's interested in labour market insights. Thank you for your time and attention. Until next time, take care.